Inexperienced developers tend to organize their code by technology rather than by feature. This is a mistake. It leads to a few problems, and let's talk about the first one. First one is folder straddling. So when do you want to look at everything that's implemented with the same technology? There are three situations I thought of. It's either when you're learning the technology, when you're teaching it, when you're adding or upgrading it. Basically, when the technology is the focus instead of your app. So that's why every time a new technology is invented, everybody on the learning and teaching side, everybody is doing that right now when it's first created. And so they all kind of unanimously decide that the folder structure should reflect the parts of that technology. And so basically they want to switch quickly between examples that use the same technology so that they can orient themselves as quickly as possible around the new technology. But eventually they grow out of that pattern, and I have a few examples. The first example is when AngularJS was new. Most Angular developers wanted separate template and controller folders because Angular treats templates and controllers very differently. And because everybody was focused on this new and exciting technology that had templates and controllers, they wanted their folders to have templates and controllers. But it didn't take very long for people to realize that this doesn't scale very well. So almost all at the same time, everybody started saying, yeah, you know what? This isn't a great folder structure. What we want instead is features, and then within those features, we can have a template and a controller, but the primary focus is the feature, not the fact that there are templates and controllers. Here's another example. It's not so much unanimous, but more and more people have gone away from either Redux or the global store folder. So when single-page apps became mainstream, state management became a concern because you weren't refreshing the browser every time something changed. So what we needed was a way to manage state, and so we started creating these technologies that manage state, so state management libraries, and people wanted to give them their own like store folder so that you can have your regular components and your features, and then state, because people thought of, especially with Redux, this state stuff as this like separate concern that floated above the entire application. But here I just want to read this paragraph verbatim because it describes, I think, pretty well what is actually happening. A global store is an implementation detail and nothing more. The fact that reducers or states or slices are ultimately collected into a single global object is only a mechanism for reactivity and Redux DevTools. Any code that assumes it can just grab any state from anywhere in the global store is going to be bug prone. So it's not actually like global in the traditional sense, because each store slice is going to export its own actions and selectors to interface with instead. It's safer that way. And that actually entirely abstracts away the fact that there happens to be a global store behind them. So in the end, you just have a bunch of independent features like always. Why would you want it any different? This is the best way to develop stuff. And so your folder structure should reflect that. You just have features like always. Next is types, and the React community is behind the Angular community on this one, but when Angular developers were new to TypeScript, this was like 6 years ago, 2017-ish, that's when I was new to TypeScript. For a short period of time, they all wanted to create this interfaces or types folder where all their TypeScript types would go, but then it would be separate from their features. But it's the same thing with everything else. When you separate by technology, you end up having to spend most of your time in totally different folders, and it's extremely annoying. And types are probably the worst example of this, because when you edit a type, there's no way you don't also have to edit other things. And those things are always going to be in different folders if you're going to do this separation by technology. So you learn pretty fast that this actually sucks, that you want to define the types as close to the features, the code that depends on them, as possible. So the Angular community is mostly switched away from that, but the React community is still basically organizing by, well, I don't know. I don't know every project, but Twitter React tends to organize, or tends to be like doing this in the better way. But I still see a lot of new projects out there that have a dedicated types folder. That's going to go away. This is actually a common and predictable thing. Every time there's a new technology, the developer's like, whoa, look at this new thing. We should create a folder for it. Like I said earlier, learners and teachers are both focused on the technology, so they want, they want their folders to reflect their concerns. So they see the new tech and they're like, whoa, is this a new concern? They confuse new ways of developing with new content. But it's only a temporary period of time, and it will always subside over time. The next problem separation by technology creates is it makes it more difficult to find files. And when you're trying to find files, usually there are two situations where this happens, where you want to find files. Either you're becoming familiar with a project, so you're just getting oriented, or you're debugging an issue, so you're trying to find the file where the issue is. And so let's talk about the first one, becoming familiar with a project. So when you're new to a technology, you may want to see the technology reflected in the folder structure to help you orient yourself according to the technology, because that's what you're concerned with. But this is a losing battle because you're going to be confused no matter what. You're new to the technology, you're new to the project. You're not going to really understand anything. And the technology side, it will look a little bit familiar if you organize by technology, your folders. But you can just as easily do like Command P if you're doing VS Code, and search for the file extension that uses the technology. So for example, let's say we have a UI with profile, activity feed, and friends, and we're looking at profile, and we're looking at this folder structure where everything is organized by technology. Controllers, atoms, thingies, doodads, whatevers. This doesn't reflect what you're seeing. And so if you're starting from the perspective of a user, which is a great way to get familiar with the product, you're going to look at this and be like, okay, all right. Let's see where we need to go. Okay, but if you're organizing by feature, it's going to reflect it. And that'll be a lot easier to orient yourself. You're going to see what's important in this particular project, and yeah, that is more intuitive. And when you do want to find something of a specific technology, what you can just do is search. Like I said, and file extensions are supposed to indicate the technology that's used to implement the stuff in the file. And it's the last part of the name because it's the least important detail. You shouldn't have the technology be the very last part of your file name and then also your top level folder in your project. That's insane. You need to keep your priorities straight and realize that the project matters more than the way it's implemented. So then you can look here and see, this just makes so much more sense. Yeah. And then the second situation is when you're debugging an issue. So let's say you have a problem in the UI. What you want is good developers tools that can lead you from the problem to the cause. So inspect element, click on component, whatever, and then it leads you through to the place where you find the actual problem. Okay? And imagine if you had it organized by technology, like this, you would probably have a file open from 5 totally different folders. That sucks. If you're organized by feature, all these are going to be in the same folder because they're supporting the same feature. So you probably won't open more than one folder, and you may not even open more than one file, because separating folders, separating files, these are kind of similar concepts, and a lot of the times you don't need to even split a file up. It can be, it's just like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with React, and the way I wish people were developing Angular more. You can have it all in one place. There's no reason to split them up. None whatsoever, unless you're going to make ridiculously big components. And then that's not a great idea, because what's the point of components if they're not small and reusable? The third issue is reusability confusion. Speaking of Angular and HTML and JavaScript, this is something I struggled with for a while, and I have learned since this. But basically, if your code is organized by technology rather than feature, you might see that technology, that slice that you're using for that technology, and you might want to reuse that across multiple features, just that little slice of technology. And it seems convenient at first, but it actually introduces unnecessary complexity in it, because each feature has its own independent purpose. And that purpose may drive changes that affect, more often this happens, it'll affect multiple layers of the feature, rather than one individual part of it. Like if you need to add a button or something, the text inside probably needs to come from JavaScript, or the event handler needs to be in JavaScript. You're usually touching multiple things. And so if you have this little shared technology, this is more like reuse by convenience, or coincidence. Something just coincidentally is the same between features, and you're just reusing it to avoid repetition. But that's not a great idea. So because this shared thing is going to end up having a lot of switch logic in it, a lot of if it's this feature, then this, if it's that feature, then this, you might as well just have separate templates. And then if you want, split the other thing into a different feature and import that into the other features. Because then this is its own independent, coherent thing that can change on its own. And sometimes you'll have to change multiple of these, but usually you can actually get away with just changing one thing. So these should be together. They usually change together. That's just the most convenient way to organize it. And then you're not going to be tempted to reuse one layer of technology. It doesn't make sense. I've been writing component-only code for a long time now, 8 years, and I've never actually been tempted to reuse just one slice of it. It's this pattern has made the most sense. I've never had to fight it. It's really nice. So yeah, that should be your primary concern. These thin vertical slices, doesn't matter how many technologies are involved. You just want to stick them together, make them coherent things, and they're usually going to change together. So it's nice to have them together. And then if you need to share functionality, break out a new slice. The only exception to this is like NPM packages or stuff where technology dependencies, you have to really keep them separate, but that's like a rare exception. Most of the time, in a concern you might think of, I'm about to address in the next section. But yeah, most of the time, this is how you want to do it. The vast majority of the time, pretty much always. So here's that concern that I mentioned. One of the things people love doing because it makes them not have to think as hard is putting all the technology layers together so that they don't have to think about importing and dependencies and avoiding circular dependencies. Because, like this shows here, you can have two separate features that technically are kind of like a circular dependency, but you don't actually have to worry about it because they only import from layers above. This is legitimately one of the reasons that people tell me that, no, I don't want to put the Redux stuff inside the same folder as the component because, it's global. It should be able to be shared and easy to import in other features. It's sort of this layer that just floats above the entire app, and it's really easy to think of it as something that can just be imported anywhere at any time. But this is a strategy of avoidance. This is just being lazy, because we need to think about this. A circular dependency is when multiple things have become the same thing. It's just one thing, actually. Oops, my face is in the way. Look at that. You have thing one depending on thing two depending on one thing. Those are just a thing. Those are the same thing. when we try to preserve this separation by technology, that's just us avoiding the consequences of our actions. Where a circular dependency, what we want is to be warned when we are accidentally creating large things. And so it helps us keep potential bundle sizes small, because things can be still segmented into separate bundles that are feature focused. And so they have the least amount of dependencies in order to implement a specific feature. So when we separate by technology, it's an escape hatch. It just allows us to sidestep the entire issue of circular dependencies. But the reason we want the circular dependencies is to keep the small bundles, and separating by technology does not help us with that. It totally helps us avoid the whole issue. So let's look at this example. Let's say we have two features, A and B, and we've got this dependency pattern that we already looked at. And let's say we've got some code that's shared between them. This is just an example, but there are real examples. It might be called common, slice, or whatever. But you basically think of it as like, okay, any feature might want to have this thing, so we're just going to put it inside here, and then we'll be able to import it from whatever feature we want. Don't even think about it. Just import whatever we want. It's at the higher layer, so it doesn't matter where we import it. And so we just create dependencies that really don't make sense when you're focused on features and bundles that make sense. So in this hypothetical scenario, we might have 18 kilobytes for all the shared stuff, 2 kilobytes for each component, and then if we're trying to load feature A, we're gonna have all these incidental imports that put the bundle as 20 kilobyte. Well, not the bundle. We're gonna have two bundles that we need when the page loads. We're gonna need the bundle for just the component code, and then for all this shared stuff. And that will be 20 kilobytes in this example, and same for page B. One of the things I like about barrel files is it prevents you from doing this, because it will actually create circular dependencies. If you have a barrel file that exports everything from one feature, it will warn you, because that feature, the barrel file, is importing from another barrel file, and that has a dependency going back the other way. So that's one reason I really love barrel files. They're sometimes inconvenient, but that's one thing they help with, because we do want our features to be separate to make bundles not bigger than they need to be. So we do have some shared code in here. So how do we work that out? Well, what we can do is, this is how you always resolve these circular dependencies. You split out the common thing, and then you import that into both features. So in this case, I actually, the total code still adds up to 22 kilobytes. We got 6, 8, and 8. That, if you look back, that was exactly how much before, but it's just split out differently. So A only imports from A and C. B only imports from B and C. C is the top level standalone thing. It doesn't need to be named common. That's a terrible name for anything. It doesn't need to be named shared. It shouldn't be in a shared folder. That's a terrible name for anything. It just is what it is. And then things that need it can import it. That's how code works. That's how modular anything works. Anything that's reusable should just stand on its own and be able to be imported anywhere. So you split out the common thing and you create 3 different bundles. This actually reduces the initial load time by 6 kilobytes. That's a big deal, because now you've got 8 kilobytes here, and then the shared stuff, which is 6 kilobytes. And now to load feature A, all you need is this bundle and this bundle, and that's going to be 14 kilobytes, or 20 kilobytes. No, 14. Yeah, that's the total. So same thing for B. So separate by feature. Don't see horizontal or like technology layers as freedom to import however you want. You want to keep a disciplined modular system for your code so that you don't muck up your whole import system. And so it's not like a ball of imports going everywhere. You want things to be clean. You want it to be a graph with the minimal number of imports. And so you can slice each feature individually, and then in order to load a page, you don't need any code that you're not using. Tree shaking can't solve all this for you. Like with a global store with Redux, there are just going to be a ton of extra things just stacked onto the same reducer, and so you want to keep things cleanly separated like this. And if you're skeptical, comment with an example and we'll work through it. Everything can always be solved through this vertical separation. Okay, fifth one, huge folders. This one's a little bit tedious. I kind of don't really want to talk about it, but basically I'll just summarize it. I just go through a ton of examples in the article. I have a link in the description. And so basically when you organize by technology, you're going to have to repeat your features within that technology. So you have components and store. Whereas by feature, you're going to have the 5 features at the top, and then each will have a supporting technology file. Okay, so there's still a folder with 5 things in it, but there's only 1 instead of 2. And then you can try different things to mitigate it, and there are basically everything that you do to make things nicer is better when you organize by feature rather than by technology. Okay. So another thing people do is organize by routes, and this is fine. This is great. This is actually the most intuitive way to find features when you're getting familiar with a project. But the one-to-one, like, features don't always have a one-to-one relationship with routes. Sometimes you can have a feature within 2 routes, and just make sure you understand that. And as soon as you see that happen, just move that shared feature to a top level folder where it can easily be imported into both routes, and it's kind of visible as a standalone thing. This is usually a temporary thing where you want things organized by routes. It's nice for small things. Eventually, though, you have to have just standalone features, and the route stuff is just context. It's just a way to access it, and it's not like a defining thing about the features. Okay? So those are the main concerns, but unfortunately, no matter what you do, there are always going to be limitations because there is no great way to organize code in a folder structure. So for organizing by feature is definitely better, but it's still going to have issues because think about the code you're writing. What is its relationship to other code? It's importing it and it's getting imported. And that creates a dependency graph. If you try to fit that graph into a directory tree, you're going to have a bad time. And that's the bad time that we are very familiar with. Look at this. This is our code, and we're stuffing it into folders like this. It doesn't work. It will always be obnoxious. It's never going to just be nice. So imagine if we didn't have to deal with that. What if we could just edit this directly? If maybe in VS Code we had an extension where we had this graph over on the left-hand side, and we could edit the files directly here, like we click on it and it opens the whole file here. Wouldn't that be nice? And there can be different ways to organize it, like you can categorize things. There are many ways you can solve it, but people have tried to solve it before with symlinks, but these are always annoying to maintain. These are so annoying. I don't know if you've ever tried using them, but they do get annoying. And it kind of gets confusing because you're exploring from the perspective of a tree, and then you see the same thing in 2 places. You're like, wait, okay. You learn like, okay, that's a symlink, but in the end, it's really weird. It'd be easier if you just had one thing, and you knew that other things were pointing to it, like this folder and this folder, that thing and that thing. That would be nice. NX DevTools, NX, I don't know if you call this DevTools. I forgot what it's called. But NX has a great visualizer for bundles or dependencies, whatever. So you can see what's importing what, and it's really nice. It just lays it out. What I would like is to be able to click on these things and have it open in VS Code so you can edit it. It just a really nice integrated way. I don't know if people have done this before, but this is ideally what you want, because we are editing a graph, not a folder tree. Our code imports code in the form of a graph, not a tree. So there are going to be extra things that we want, because folders sometimes can just be like scopes. We can create a folder like up here. Yeah, some commonality. So just some way, some semantic way to organize things to make things less crazy. But the issue is with that we can actually identify multiple commonalities. So, for example, you had something called concat array strings dot function. Where would you put that? Let's say you want it to, you could have it top level. I think that immediately seems like a bad idea because it seems low level. And so you create a what folder? A string folder? Because that would be organizing by feature. Like string is the feature that this cares about. When I talk about feature, I also mean types, because they tend to those do have a one-to-one relationship, and you can import, and everything stacks on top of the type. So the type is basically like the foundation of each vertical slice. You can import the type from another feature, but basically these thin vertical slices, the type is the foundation of it. And so I've thought of this, like maybe have a string folder where you do all your string utilities and who knows what else, just string things. And then maybe you have an array folder. But the idea is that you have a container, like a bucket, to put this function in. And in my opinion, it's better than a utils folder, because utils, that's organizing by technology or lack thereof. It's not telling you what it's for. And so I think that there are multiple buckets you can put things in. So why do you have to choose? With a tree, with like a folder tree, you do have to choose. That's going to be like string or array, but things can be categorized in multiple ways at the same time. So maybe there's a way to deal with that too. Anyways, just one more way that a folder tree kind of sucks at what it's trying to do. And that's kind of getting philosophical, but basically I'd be pretty happy if people were just organizing their code by feature instead of technology. And this stuff would be like bonus stuff, like to finally solve the code organization problem with a graph instead of a folder. But it gets complicated. I don't know what people have done with this. You don't want something that's locked into a certain technology. You want something that's very, 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 very general and something you can rely on, because I think that so many times in the past, things that were supposed to be ultimate solutions to architecture issues, those were coupled to specific technologies, and so they kind of faded when the technology became unpopular. I don't want that to happen. I want something really generic, something that could really work. But anyway, this isn't the point. This is just saying that nothing's perfect with these folder trees, and so it would be better for people to organize by features, but you're still going to have some annoying issues. So in conclusion, what you're concerned with at the beginning of a project or when you're new with a technology is not going to be what you're concerned with later on, because you're going to switch your focus from the technology to what you're actually doing with it. And ever since I started organizing by feature, my life got way easier. I thought I would run into some problem, some issue, some dead end I never thought of, and like people would criticize it and all these things, but that never happened. In the end, my life just got simpler. Instead of having these weird separations that are just annoying to manage. It just ended up being easy. And that's how I wish everybody would organize their projects. I'm kind of tired of opening these example projects I've been doing with State Adapt and seeing like a store folder. Like you don't want to treat the global store really as a global store. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, features, organizing by feature is how your code actually works under the hood. And so that's how it should be reflected in your folder tree. So yeah, if you agree with this, please share it with your teams, and hopefully we can get people through this stage faster, because this stage right here, this one, right here, it's annoying. You see it over and over and over and over again. Hey, new tech, whoa, is this a new concern? Is this a separate concern? No, you're still developing apps. It's never going to change. New tech is just new tech. It's just a new way to do things. Don't get hyper focused on it. You're still just getting a thing done. So, yeah, these things are in support of the real concern. So, please let's move through the stage more quickly in the future. That would be great. All right. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Give me an example if you think that anything is infeasible. I promise it's not, but yeah, please do give examples, and that would be fun to look through. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.